So I grew up in the church. In fact, my dad was a minister. He was in the pulpit 30 years. So in a lot of ways, some of these basic principles and ideas that people talk about, you would think are just going to be second nature. And I suppose they were from the standpoint of, I heard about them a lot, I knew all the scripture references on it, but then there's that point of actually making it a personal faith, a personal walk. And so that was a journey I went through. I always gave in some fashion, one way or another, but I didn't have a particular intentionality around it. I certainly didn't have any metric or notion of what it needed to be. And in part because I grew up with this very clear delineation between, well, those things that happen in the Old Testament are Old Testament, and those things that happen in the New Testament, the New Covenant, is all we need to pay attention to. And there's certainly some truth to that, and I'm glad that we're not running around beheading each other anymore. But at the same time, I came to understand, and it took me a while, I was well into my 20s, before I realized, well, true, but there's core principles that you draw from the Old Testament about the Lord's heart, about what it looks like to walk out a relationship with Him. Because we get a glimpse in the Old Testament to extensive periods of time of people walking with the Lord and seeing what that experience is like. And a lot of times the New Testament is much more, just fire and forget, and you run in there and run out, and we're busy expanding the gospel. And so as I went through that journey and exploring those concepts, one of the things that came to the surface then was there wasn't really any clarity in the New Testament anyway about what does that principle, that concept of giving look like, and what constitutes a step of faith in that regard. And I think there's a reason for that. I think that the Lord doesn't want it to be a formula. He doesn't want it to be a check the box kind of a thing. He wants it to be something that's driven from the heart. He wants it to be something that is sacrificial in nature.